The more things change, the more they say the same. That's doubly true in the world of indie ball. Find out more on this week's episode of the Indie Ball Report podcast. Episode 259 of the Indie Ball Report podcast starts now. We're here with a cheese connoisseur and wherever the hell I am. How you doing?
You're a cheese.
We're off to a phenomenal start today.
I made myself laugh. That's what counts.
As long as you made somebody laugh, then I guess it was okay.
I'll be the first one of the day. I was working from home and just like saying things into the void / to my not entertained wife. She's a saint.
That or maybe she's just like used to working with crazy people.
I mean, I was going to say it's been like 9 years, I think, to the day that we officially started dating. Like, dude, how patient. Oh, you think if you're listening to this, you're like, Ryan's a lot. Imagine. You have no idea.
Before I thought I was stealing you from her, but I think she's just going to encourage these long recordings so that way she gets more of a break. Kind of like, it's almost like when you see a young mother and she's just like, take this child away from me for 4 hours because I can't.
Yeah. Man. Yeah. I remember that trial. Oh, were we not talking about Casey Anthony?
Hey, she was acquitted.
Allegedly. Are we talking about Casey Anthony?
Yeah. She drove away in a Bronco and OJ smiled and nodded.
Hey, man.
Thumbs up.
One way or another, if you get acquitted, you're going to Florida. So, anywho, where are we?
We're talking about OJ having some scores to settle, which might be the scariest Twitter live I've ever seen.
Or are we talking about NJ having some scores to settle? Because I think that brings us to our first topic.
Oh, wow. What a wonderful transition.
I hope that means you have to keep the OJ talking now.
Well, if the mic doesn't fit, I'll have to acquit. So we'll find out.
Yes, we are going to get in trouble. Anyway, what do you think of the New Jersey hiring?
Yeah, so let's talk about New Jersey and their managerial hiring, as you just said. Yeah. Friend of the show got hired to this position. Love to see it. Bert Gonzalez, you are the manager of the New Jersey Jackals. Really happy for the dude. Earned the opportunity. Love to see it here. For those that are unaware, me and Will, back when the show was good, interviewed him. And really nice guy. Guy's really into his work. Very appreciative of every opportunity he gets. So he's the kind of guy you root for to get opportunities like this. Certainly go back and listen to that interview. We'll link that in the show notes if you want to, or you can just go to the website, go episodes, interviews, and it will be on that page. Just give it a second to load. And a little bit of background. Was a college coach at a couple different programs from 2016 to 2020. A coach in technically now the Frontier and Atlantic League, but he was with Rockland for the main bulk of that time. In various roles, bullpen catcher, first base coach, third base coach, bench coach, those kinds of things. A Jamie Keefe guy, if you would. And he also owns the Indie Ball Jobs Scouting Organization, a local to the New Jersey area. All in all, he does kind of fit the bill here. I'm interested to see what you think about it. This is his first time as a professional away from Jamie Keefe, so I'll be interested to see if that has any effect or if it's just kind of an interesting factoid at the end. Because as we rated in our much maligned now managerial rankings or ratings, we rated Jamie very highly, although some people took offense to the way we ranked the Amish team, but we'll get to that later on.
Okay, we will get to that later then. All right. Well, what do I think? I mean, I think it's a close to the best they could do, I would guess. You're not going to get into that situation. You're not going to get a traditional candidate. We kind of talked about that before. I think looking non-traditional, looking readily available because you need to do it quick, and looking well-liked and well-connected, I think this fits the bill. I think there were a lot of check boxes that required checking, and I think they've managed to do quite a good job of checking just about any. I mean, you'd love some more for such a complicated spot, you might like some more hands-on actual managing experience. But he still has been around a lot of experienced guys and some good organizations and some good coaches, I think. But yeah, I think it's a good move. I have fingers crossed for him. I hope this isn't a garbage fire. And if it is, I hope it's one of those things that reads, it's like, yeah, but what's he going to do? Because I don't want it to be, I compare some of these things to last year for my NASCAR fans. Corey LaJoie, who is always rumored to be a guy who has top level potential, but he doesn't have top level equipment, got a ride subbing for a guy in a top level car, and he had a bad race. And the vibe is kind of like, well, that's done now. Like that, he might not get another shot. I prefer it to be one of those things where hopefully this is a role where if it does go a little sideways, doesn't go well, everyone's like, well, not an ideal situation. It's okay. Instead of being like, well, that didn't go well, we don't need to, try that again. Because I think Bert's a good dude. I think he's one that is well liked and people would like to see. He's a good guy within this baseball circle that we find ourselves in. I think it would be great to see him not only get this opportunity, but make sure he gets a fair opportunity out of this whole thing.
I echo all of that except for the NASCAR bit because I can't endorse Zoom racing. That just doesn't move the needle here at all. But more to the point, yeah, no, I agree. I don't want to see Bert wind up as like the sacrificial lamb in this situation because I do think he has the potential to be a good manager. I definitely get that sense here, but this is not an easy position. We've talked about it before once Bobby was, departed from the organization. But this is not the most enviable job to have on earth. Yeah, so that is something to watch for. I will say I think he is well equipped, if for no other reason, like you said, really nice guy. Everyone seems to like him. So that'll help bring some guys in here. He also has the scouting work that he runs. Admittedly, it's still fairly new. It's still getting off the ground and really trying to move some bodies along here, but that does at least give you a connection and more of a pipeline to bring some guys in, even if they're not really up to the standard that you're hoping for. If you need to fill out a roster, it's one way to fill out a roster, right? I mean, you'd rather go to war with 26 guys than 20 guys. So it is what it is there. But also being now just off of a Atlantic Lake staff, I mean, I think it's pretty straightforward to say if High Point's going to release a guy, they're going to be going to New Jersey if they have any sort of value whatsoever. So that's going to be at least a useful tidbit as well. And like I said, I think, I don't know if I actually said before this, but I like it from the perspective of you're trying to change the culture and perception of the organization. And part of that starts with the manager, right? Mm-hmm. That is one of your outward fan-facing positions. Is a manager position because they're going to be there. You can have them around for 12 months of the year. They're going to be one of the guys going to the community as well as building the roster, obviously. But he's the kind of guy that when he interacts with local fans, when he interacts with people at the ballpark, when he's interacting with just, the general populace, you're going to come away and have a positive perception of. And changing the perception of the organization to the public is one of the key things here. Now, obviously, there's a lot of other things going on with Hinchcliffe, with Patterson, with the whole situation. We're not going to ignore that, but we've also hammered that pretty hard in the past.
Yeah.
But changing the perception with the actual people showing up and with the people that see the organ like, I'm not doing that. They haven't really wowed me so far. If you can leave them with a positive outlook, that helps a lot. And I think he is a decent part of that.
Yeah, and he's a guy that has a track record of being for the guys on the team. Yeah.
He's in the situation.
And literally his whole thing has been getting guys signed to other places. So he's, you can be comfortable. It's what he's going for. PJ Phillips, who managed last season, he has a reputation for, he's generally pretty much for the guys on the team. He'll, give good opportunities, try to not leave guys in a bad spot. It sounds like not always being empowered by the organization last year, and given what he would need to do that, that's just been the rumor. But I would say this year it's a good start to have another guy who seems to put players, as a priority and hopefully he will have what he needs with the owner and with the new GM to, actually follow through on everything. The thing that actually stuck out to me was, I know PJ is not the biggest give me the mic type of guy. He's not he's a dugout locker, like clubhouse guy. Like he's for the baseball, and that's great when that's what you want. But if you want, out in front of everything, doing the, marketing side for you and all that, it's not really the guy. I mean, Bert knows how to brand. Bert knows how to be out and be the voice of something. It'll be interesting to see if they utilize that. And if they do, I think it could be a really good fit. Also, it also occurs to me, we've spoken before about the demographics of the town of Patterson, and the ownership has spoken previously about wishing they lean harder into the Latin and Hispanic community there. Having, first of all, not only Bert with his personality and his willingness to go out and talk to people and meet people, but I mean, it sounds dumb. This is the one I've been having trouble sort of nailing down, but like having a manager like Gonzalez, like it says it right there. Like that is a name where like a lot of people in that community be like, all right, like that's a name.
Yeah, there's a connection.
That feels like a name that would live on my street. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that connects with people. It's like, okay, so this is an organization that maybe last year was like, what the hell are we doing out here? Like what they are wondering as people of the town of Patterson, like, were you just squatting in our stadium to be like more, or maybe I see myself more within this organization combined with, hopefully the organization doing the right things in the community that they talked about, realizing openly that they should be doing. That would be my hope, that this is part of a bigger thing. And they don't just be like, here's Bert Gonzalez, good luck, which I don't think they will, for the record. I don't think that's the move, but I'm hoping that this is the trend that is, I'm hoping I'm correct in seeing this trend start.
Yeah, I will say this much from from the new people in the organization, say Hunt and now bringing Bert, there are positive steps here. There's smaller steps, but they're positive steps in the right direction, which is at the very least a nice change of pace to see from doing things just completely wrong in the past. I also kind of like, and this is a really, really minor thing, but I really did like how I got the teamwork notification saying the position was filled. Which I kind of dug that. It's like, oh, cool. At least I'm not out in the wind. I appreciate that. But now I knew I wasn't getting that job anyway. I was just doing it for shits and gigs. But, even still, if you were legitimately applying for that, it must be nice to get that.
No idea. But I will say I think it's not that his challenge he was walking into was easy, but it is getting more difficult. We mentioned previously that there was rumored to be a bunch of transactions right around, Bobby leaving and possibly involving PJ, getting some of his guys back essentially. Since the 14th, so within the last 10 days as this podcast is released, after a pretty quiet offseason, they didn't really have much direction here. New Jersey traded Rusper Estrada, Tiquan Forbes, and Lance Lusk to Charleston. Those are three guys I like, all of them. I am not as comfortable in them going to the Atlantic League, but for just speaking to New Jersey situation, that is a loss, certainly. They've also released Dylan Castaneda. They've released Willie Garcia. And he has since been signed by the Dirty Birds. They also released Matt Vogel. In addition to that, they traded Braylon Jones to Ottawa for future considerations, released infielder Martin Figueroa, and released Justin Showalter. Then what else do we got? They released Alex Toral, and they traded John Baker to Chicago. Now,
they also had another release today too. Pineda.
That's right. Yeah, I haven't gotten that one right. Good call. With that said, a lot of the trades that have been, the Atlantic League trades were for players to be named later. So we are getting Bert on the positive side is showing up with multiple player to be named later deals open where he can start calling back pieces. So he has some movement there. He's not just out on an island.
Dude, I will say one thing. I don't mean to interrupt the point here, but
go for it.
Go to the Frontier League page, look for February 22nd, look at Schomburg's move. Look who they just got.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Paul Cook, Schomburg.
Yeah. I know.
That's nice.
It's good to see Schomburg making moves, but like Schomburg kind of flies. They're they're weird. I don't know what to make of Schallenberg. That's going to be a future conversation, is Ryan does not know what to make of Schallenberg ever. And that is essentially where I'm at. But it's good to see them moving. It's good to see another good lefty pitcher finding their way into indie ball, especially a guy, who has a good track record. Who knows? He might end up back in Mexico quick, but we'll see.
Yeah, very good pitcher.
I mean, filthy last year. Filthy both years in the Frontier.
I mean, yeah, he's a good player, but yeah.
Also, by the way, a good example of, everybody take Pioneer League stats with a grain of salt, because he did not do great in like a short stint with Missoula. He was good, not great. Wouldn't have hinted that he's going to go sub 2.5 2 seasons later with Frontier League teams. So just to shout that out in the
fairness too. If you look at his 2019 coming out of Bradley in his 20 innings in Southern Illinois, I am Mike Pinto guy, 3.92. So that's pretty solid.
There was a track record, but there's been a couple guys like that. I've been deep in the transactions the past few days, except for since apparently the Frontier League last updated there. So I'll let that go.
But I see what you're saying. Rebuilding a roster there and losing some of the key pieces there, and it's been a lot of subtraction, not addition from New Jersey so far. So it's going to be to see who becomes that addition.
Yeah, and it's good to see. I don't know. It's good to see that at least as these trades are happening, they are for player to be named later deals. Because again, even though it might be like, oh, they didn't get anything back, in reality, why would they put somebody on there when they're, just going to have a manager now who has to make a decision about whether that is even a guy he wants around. So there are positives. I want to make sure it's clear. There are some positives to the deals happening. And most of those deals happen to get guys somewhere where they wanted to be, which I'm always going to be supportive of.
Last point on New Jersey before we move on to the other managerial bit, which I think is a little bit more spicy. Do we think J.R.D. Sarcina makes his way down to New Jersey? Guy that Bert's familiar with? Guy that's familiar in the Frontier? Obviously, I don't think New England's really in a position to part with him, but depending on the offer, I could see it. Or if JR is just like, I'd rather be with the dude I know.
J.R.D. Sarcina, happy birthday, J.R.D. Sarcina.
How about that?
Yeah, I don't know. He's a confusing option to me. I think it's one of those interesting ones because he is from New England. That is part of it. Oh, okay. So I don't know if he's hungry to leave, even if he has familiarity down in Jersey. If nothing else, it's good to know that if he struggles out of the box, he probably has a backup option. And talk about just one of the things that are good for players. JR deserves an opportunity and like a good, solid opportunity in indie ball, because it's not that he hasn't had opportunities in the past, but there's always a bit of an asterisk on it. Like he showed up well in High Point, represented himself well. And then he went to Lincoln, which is a tough setup, and he struggled a little bit. And then from there, it's just been kind of fighting an uphill battle. Last year, he toughed out the whole season with Empire State. I want him to have a good year. And if he's going to sink or swim, I want to be on his own, not sort of aided by outside circumstance.
Well, we will see. We'll see how that Jackal roster turns out. 76 days until opening day. So,
God, that's so little time to build a roster. But
anyone's going to do it,
it's the guy from the Indie Ball Jobs connection.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying, man. That's why I like having that kind of guy in there. Because as I was saying, would you rather go to war with half-empty clip, or would you rather at least have a full clip, even if it's not the caliber you want?
As always, I would rather go to war with... Nope, I can't say it. That's a war crime. That's right. Never mind.
Okay, moving on. Chicago.
Leave it in the pod. Let's talk Chicago, my guy. Interesting.
Yeah, so the Dogs announced their coaching staff for the 2024 season. We mentioned when we did that, the review or the grading on all the managers, that Butch Hobson was a guy that we were 50-50 on, had heard that maybe he wouldn't be coming back. We didn't go too much into it because we didn't have too much at the time, but now that looks to be confirmed because he is not back. In fact, the only returning man is Stu Clyburn, who's going to return for his fourth season as pitching coach. Thomas Incaviglia, yes, the one that is the nephew of Pete. So Chicago versus Cleveland, a little spicy now, kind of like that. Will join as the hitting coach. He's also spent the last 3 years in Tri-City with Pete as the bench coach, and he also managed the Palm Springs team in the California Winter League. And of course, then we have a new manager as well. Jeff Isom is going to be the new manager of the team. He has 19 years of experience from 2000 to 2018. 13 of those years are in Indie Ball, 11 in the Frontier, 2 in the Northern, 6 of those years in the Brewers organization, 3 in Single A, 2 in Rookie Ball, 1 in High A. His overall record across just a shade over 1,900 games is 948 and 962. However, you just look at Indie Ball games, he is 621 and 583 in just over 1,200 games. Butch Hobson and Joe Dominic are both dismissed as of now. Overall thoughts on Isom being hired, as well as Incaviglia coming in, and then I guess Clyburn staying here.
Well, my first thought is, and this is not the most pertinent thought, is it's somewhat funny to see what some would call, like, quote, the other Clyburn and Incaviglia on the same coaching staff with what some might call the other Chicago baseball team. Kind of a vibe. I'm not saying that as an insult, by the way. I'm saying that it's like kind of aligns.
It is a little bit of we have Incaviglia and Clyburn at home. The Incaviglia and Clyburn you have at home.
Ouch, that sounds worse. But yeah, okay.
I mean, that's basically what you just said. I mean,
hey, if you want to put words in my mouth, you can go ahead and do that.
Okay,
just remember it's your podcast. But getting back to it, Hobson has not been well. It's, you know, a season at this level is so long. I know it's only 100 games, but think about only 100 games. Good Lord. You figure that's going to be a lot of bus rides, a lot of hotel stays, a lot of long days in the sun. So it makes sense that they had to make a decision. They went to an experienced guy from an experienced guy, which I think is good. I think we see a lot of bad handoffs when it comes to an experienced guy leaving, giving it to an inexperienced guy, and the people who are there and have come to not expect necessarily the way things are done, but at least the way things are handled by someone with experience. Sometimes that handoff is ugly.
Yeah.
I think that is something they've avoided. However, I don't know. I'm not as familiar with the dynamics of Chicago because I really started covering the whole American Association as well right before this year where he was gone for so much of it. So I do have some hard time reading that if I'm being transparent. I don't know. I mean, not to change the subject fully, but I am hung up in what this means compared to the Josh Altman just getting traded.
Yeah.
It's hard to think they're not related and it's hard to not read into it. So that kind of, it's funny. I felt good. I was like, you know what? It's kind of a funny grouping, but it does seem like an experienced group of coaches. You got some familiar faces, some people who can sort of smooth the transition, and some experience there that guys can buy into. I think we're good. And then the Josh Altman trade happens. I'm like, well, maybe something's, maybe not all is as good as I'm hoping. And that's tough for everybody because I think this league is better when Chicago's good, by the way. I think having the sort of anchor point of that Chicago market be a competitive team is good. And I think the whole league benefits from that. So I'm not, in a non-biased way, I do root for Chicago. So I'm hoping this is good. And I'm hoping my initial read's right. But now it's kind of a second. That's where you catch me kind of.
Plus the Chicago-Milwaukee rivalry is nice too.
Agreed. Yeah. And they need that really to give balance to this league. Honestly, they need that strong sort of anchor point in the North, especially when Kansas City is doing what Kansas City does down in the South.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I mean, I echo a lot of that. I think it is a bit curious the time where Altman gets traded, something that, we hear about Butch departing from the team a couple days ago. And then immediately this deal comes through. Now, it could have been in the works for a while. I mean, the trade was Altman for Voit. Those are two good players switching sides. And I mean, a guy that has a sub-4 ERA in Lake Country is no small feat. And Voit does have a bit of a track record of being a very successful pitcher. There's no doubt about that. But Josh Altman is a perennial MVP candidate.
Right.
He is probably...
Josh Altman's, I would say, a Hall of Famer for that league, if we were to talk about it in that way.
Yeah, I mean, if he's not the best shortstop in the league, he's not far off from it.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have a guy like that, a guy that has the ability to hit 300 and hit 30 home runs in 100 games, that's to trade that piece willingly makes zero sense. There has to be more to it because that's not the kind of production you're going to replace. So unless it was a money issue or a roster restriction issue, you have to think that it comes back to what was brought in. Now, maybe it was more like, oh, I wanted to work with Dominique, or I wanted to work with Hobson, and now they're not here, so I might as well move on. Maybe it was something like that. I think it was probably more in line with something like that than it was, I don't want to work with Isom. I'd be stunned if it was something like that. As far as replacing experience for experience, Isom is probably the most experienced guy you will get at this point, right? We just talked about with Bert how the clock's running down. You got about 76 days until opening day. Dogs are about the same. I think they're a little bit close to 80, but even still, 4 days doesn't really make that huge of a difference when you're establishing a team. Circumstances are obviously different though, but even still, it's a lot of work to do in a short period of time. And like, I like the staff. I think it's very good. And if you would have told me in like December that was the decision, I would probably have a different reaction than having it in the end of February. But it does feel like something's amiss here. And I heard rumors of the way Hobson was dismissed, and it just wasn't right. It wasn't professional the way that went down. Again, I will stress it's a rumor, not definitive. I heard it from like 2 people, so take that from what it's worth. The way I heard it went down was not great, so that's not wonderful. I mean, you can't release someone via text. That's just not right. But even still, but
because I'm going to do a light walk back on Altman claim as a Hall of Fame, potential Hall of Fame American Association guy. In my head, he played probably 4 full seasons. I was seeing that consolation league thing he did.
Yeah.
So I'll say 3, he puts up 3 years closer to like the way his 2 good years have been. Now he's putting together the case. He's on pace to be a potential like type of like all-time top shortstop in the league type of numbers if he can keep it going for like another few years. That's it. That's all I'm saying. He's on pace to have a shot. I'm not saying he's like, if he stopped playing today, he would be. I'm not saying that before you jump down my throat. People who I know will. Continuing, Nick, where were you?
Yeah, so I would say more or less like, I don't have a problem with the people they hired. I don't think they're going to do a bad job. I think they're going to do actually a pretty good job. Stu is a quality pitching coach. Jeff is a quality manager. And I'm interested to see what Tom can do there now that he has more of a formal role, more of a established role. I'm just going to be curious the more and more this comes out in the wash of how it went down, what the situation winds up being. And that's really where my concern is, or where my gripe would be, is if how I heard it went, if that's actually how it went down, then I don't like that at all. Mm-hmm. But if, that's not the full story, which I wouldn't be surprised if we were missing details, then my opinion can change on it. It's just, I have such a hard time forming an opinion on it because I like the people that were brought in, and I understand Bush may not be physically able to do the job anymore, but it just feels like if you're going to move on from him, the time was A, earlier in the off season, and B, it should have been a bit more of a fanfare type of thing. And I have to think that a guy that was there for how many years in Chicago would have warranted at least a thank you post. And it feels like it's definitely not a retirement, but rather a firing, because if it was a retirement, then it would have been congrats on a great career. You would have seen also like an American Association post from it. You would have seen a lot from it, and we just didn't get that.
Yeah, I actually didn't really notice. Do they really not do any sort of post?
There's nothing.
Wow. Okay.
Even in the like, if you go to the link that I sent you, which will be in the show notes, that's what happens when you go to the Dogs homepage and click the story. It just brings you right to the coaching staff page.
Not even like a news article, really.
Huh. No. Interesting. They may have updated it since, but like checking again now, it just redirects you right to the coaching staff page.
Yeah. Shout out to General MacArthur officially coming back to Chicago. Anyway,
80 grade name.
I know, so much better than specific MacArthur. Yeah. Let me see. All right, that's fascinating. Yeah, definitely something to keep an eye on. Maybe we'll follow up on that one again.
Yeah, it feels like there's something off there. That's all I'm gonna say. But moving on from Chicago, we got a couple of little bit cleanup bits in news, and then we'll get to our interview with Brady Salisbury. Really good interview. Had a lot of fun with it. Not the most structured, but honestly, I feel like it was better this way.
Yeah,
but any case, we have the first ever professional tryout camp in continental Europe. Quebec and Trois-Rivières will host a tryout camp next month in Rouen, France. The camp is on March 30th and 31st. Both teams will invite at least one player to their spring training. This is the first evaluation camp in Europe by a North American professional team. So,
wonder who has to pay for travel on that. If they bring you out, you have to pay for travel? That's what I'm curious about.
I gotta imagine they're going to be responsible for getting there themselves. I don't think they're going to pay for your travel.
I mean, I'm just saying, if you sign a player, typically you pay for the travel of the team. Interesting. These are the things I think about. Anyway, am I too inundated in the baseball operations conversation when that's my first thought? I wonder who pays for the travel if they sign a guy from over there. Oh man. Yeah, I don't have a ton to say on it. I like it. I'm always in favor of, expanding, internationally, German last name. You think I'd be very much about expanding across Europe as they tend to do. That's not necessarily where my head is, but I do think it's good to expand the game.
You went there. Okay.
I've been impressed with the international baseball I've watched lately, especially in Europe. I think over the past decade, they've made a larger improvement than any other continent. Now, that's not to say a lot. I mean, North America obviously has already had a high talent level. Same with Asia, and Australia has already had sort of a league going. But I have been impressed with some of the countries in France specifically who have all of a sudden shown up and really developed. I know there's a lot of attention in World Baseball Classic on the Czechs and how they had really developed from the ground up a baseball system over there, and I think that's really cool. And I think it's good to see them rewarded. So I think, man. And I think it's also important to extend further information about indie ball into Europe for a lot of these guys who are like, maybe they're thinking that their path into baseball is, hey, like I need to get into affiliate ball. How can I get someone from the Yankees to notice me? When really maybe it's get noticed by these guys, and then you're playing a whole different, situation out where you're in a much better spot to get seen by somebody who maybe can get you into affiliate ball if that's your goal as a European player.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely like the growth of it, and obviously having the French teams do the France clinic makes the most sense there. But yeah, I also think it's kind of good for growing the brand a little bit, because I could definitely see this being an appeal, So I will say too, I'm looking at like flights from Rouen to Quebec City. This isn't cheap. It's like $900.
No, but I'm trying to get back and forth to Europe this year. It's a rough one.
Yeah. Well, actually, there's a $284 flight on March 13th. Obviously, that doesn't help for this clinic, but
go over early.
It's a nonstop flight too.
I mean, you're there.
Yeah, you fly from the Gaulle right into Le Gare.
Yeah, I was gonna say you got to go Paris probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not much else on that one, but thought I'd mention
a couple of cheaper flights actually. Looking at this now, they don't have the. When is their training camp, by the way? Just quickly.
March 31st.
No, I meant like the spring training camp.
I gotta say it's got to be early May, probably around sort of May.
Okay. Ooh, okay, so it's going to cost them about $800 to fly whoever the hell is out here.
I mean, that could be a good investment as things turn out. So we'll see.
We'll see. All right. Pioneer League draft we have here. I don't think we have too much to talk about here with these guys. I know we were hyping up a little bit, but I don't think there's too much here.
Yeah, honestly, I was going to do a deep dive into it. My deep dive turned up. It needs to be a deeper dive because a lot of these guys, we have a handful that didn't seem to have a baseball reference page, so it's going to be tough. But I would say, here, I can pull up the full thing again. My bad. Yeah, I mean, Galen Rutledge, he was the top pick. He went to Boise. I found it interesting that the early picks were not pitchers, because we hear a lot about how it's pretty thin as far as pitching goes. But I suspect, and there were more pitchers picked up on the back end. But you figure it's for the. I feel like a lot of these tryouts, it tends to be they pick the best available guy. It's not like trying to fill a specific niche.
Yeah,
and
it's found money.
Interesting. Yeah, it was interesting to see that the first 4 picks: Galen Rutledge with Boise, Zach Lee with Rocky Mountain, Terrell Frazier for Idaho Falls, and then Frank Podkol for Great Falls were all on the side of position players, which is it. I do think less pitchers, and this has always been the case. Less pitchers are at these tryouts or showcases, whatever you want to refer to them.
Yeah.
So I just got to figure it's just exacerbated more than ever at this point. But I do think also there's a high percentage of these guys that do get picked up. I mean, if a guy shows you anything on the mound, he's probably getting grabbed because who knows where you can make them. I did find the one. I'm going to do the background on it right now, which I should have done, but I wasn't paying attention at the time. The one that I was interested in wasn't there a McCurdy?
There was, yeah.
Yeah. Or this is the same one. Wow, it's the same one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Carson McCurdy, Glacier outfield.
Really? That is interesting. I don't. That's quite a path. That's unusual. Making appearances in the Atlantic League twice in 2 years and then disappearing and then come back into the Pioneer League draft is a fascinating situation. I mean, he's had enough to show up on a few rosters over time. He has definitely struggled, but he's one where he's been out for a year. Maybe he's got something to turn that around, so he's something to keep an eye on. That was really, it's so fun. I hate to just pick out a name who was literally the second to last pick in the draft, but that was kind of mostly what grabbed me. I think Galen Rutledge, from what I've seen, seemed like an interesting guy. I wish I had more information. These guys are going to come up more. I didn't want to waste a lot of time both researching and talking about on the podcast. For a lot of guys, I feel like might not make it out of camp for a lot of these teams. So I kind of have some information. We can kind of deep dive back again once we know what rosters these guys are bringing. But I don't want to short them. I'm very conscious of that, especially with anything the Pioneer League is involved with. I just the top pick in the draft hasn't played anything since playing the SWAC in 2022. So it's just a little tough. I mean, he put up numbers in summer ball, but that's kind of it. So that's what I'm dealing with. That was an example of why. If you ever wonder why sometimes we don't dive as deep into things, it's just because we're not sure what to say. We don't want to waste your time as well as ours deep diving into something that might become nothing. So what we'll say is this. I got them tagged. I'm going to keep an eye on them as they get dropped, or if they get picked back up, or if they stay on a roster and they make it through camp, and we'll go from there.
In other words,
it turns out a lot of these guys stay, by the way, you can bet we'll be deep diving it a lot more aggressively at next year's Florida draft.
In other words, wait until we get to the Pioneer League preview in May. And then if they're still around, we'll get more to it.
So far away. Yeah. But anyway.
Well, not really. It's almost March. So.
Oh, God. Don't remind me.
Yeah. What? Next time we record, it'll be March.
Horrors. I hate it.
But Doom will be out, so that's good. Any case.
Happy we're happy.
Last couple pieces of news real quick, and then we will get to the interview. The Birdcage has a new name. The building will remain the Birdcage. However, the field will have the naming rights given to Smithfield Foods. So I presume it'll be Smithfield Foods Field at the Birdcage. Smithfield owns a local factory in Sioux Falls that apparently employs a large percentage of people. Any immediate thoughts on this? On Twitter, you said you were going to go out.
No, I do. I mean, yeah. So think about how to go about this. I mean, I do think, technically speaking, it's going to be the John Morrell Sioux Falls facility. I think it'll be Smithfield Fields Food at the Birdcage at John Morrell Sioux Falls facility.
That's a lot.
Something like that. Maybe it's not officially named the John Morrell thing anymore, but that's at least where I had it on paper. Look, it's a local employer, so sure, buy into the community. Fine, cool. So I don't know the Sioux Falls relationship with Smithfield. I know the relationship of a lot of towns in Appalachia and throughout the Midwest and even further out west and the south and just about anywhere else with Smithfield. And okay, first, they need to have a name on the stadium, so it's good. It's good they have a sponsor hooked up somewhere. That's smart. That is a major source of money. We're talking about 6 figures. That's a big
bag.
Yes, need it for the health of indie ball. You need your teams making the damn money.
White Ulrich needs
that's good.
Checks.
Also, love they kept the birdcage. I think that's sick. I think that's a cool name. I love teams having a stadium that isn't necessarily just sponsored. It has like a cool name that relates to their thing. Very cool, very rare.
Yep.
On the other side,
yes,
this is a baseball podcast, so I'm going to keep it baseball. I'm going to talk about certain things, not always. I'm going to talk about the fact that like Smithfield is a sketchy company that's taken over small farms and smaller operations and distribution and production channels for years, and then sold out to a Chinese company that has continued that process over the last 10 years. I don't know, probably not. Am I going to talk about how like terrible and well documented conditions for these animals would like even make the most steadfast red-blooded American consider veganism with what's been reported in countless places and countless legal actions? No, or the fact they were a company that's bad for people, animals, and the entire country. I'm not going to talk about that because it's a baseball podcast.
What about the environment?
I don't really know about the environment. We're going to kill each other before the environment kills us, but that's a different conversation. Mm-hmm. But I mean, hey, it's good for the organization. Do I hate Smithfield Foods? Yes, I do. I'm glad that there are still jobs that are held up by Smithfield. The damage they've done to the farming industry is probably irreparable, but whatever. I hope that this is a waste of money for Smithfield. And, I'm glad that it is something that benefits the Canaries. I hope Smithfield never really notices that it's a waste of money necessarily. And I hope they continue to benefit as a organization without necessarily benefiting, our pork wielding overlords. There were 18 comments on Facebook. Only about half of those remain viewable, which I find interesting. All of those are positive. Always noteworthy. So
to recap today, we've discussed war crimes, extensive criminal records, potential arson.
And that's just like the last year of my life.
And now we've also talking about the industrial farming complex.
Yes. Yes, we are.
Very productive episode. NOCO renamed their stadium too.
Man.
So they now play a Four Rivers Equipment Stadium. It's a multi-year agreement. That's all there really is to that.
Don't have much to it. I think it's a solid name. Honestly, I like it more than the previous name.
You don't like Future Legends Field?
Yeah, that was weird.
Okay, good. So more farming with the equipment. So
that's fine.
I don't have any beef with them. I don't
have any beef or pork with them.
You don't want to see how the sausage is made with them?
Nice. I'm happy for you.
We talked to the general manager of the Gastonia Pro Baseball team, Brady Salisbury, today. Very informative, very fun.
It was. Yes, it was.
Had a good back and forth there. The Kentucky kid is something else. And do we have any other preview to get in on that, or just let it run?
A lot of people probably checking in will want to hear about what it was like behind the scenes as the Gastonia. Well, the prior Gastonia ownership sort of spiraled out of control. I will say we didn't talk too much about it. That's still ongoing legal nonsense. So there was it's difficult to have him on the spot with a lot of that and on the record with a lot of it. We've done several podcasts on it in the past. If you want more details on it, a lot of the sourcing, a lot of the things that he could tell us are going to be similar to what I was able to tell people based on sourcing that was really close to stuff, involved there. So don't, I hope you don't go in just late for that. We did talk a lot about how he had a very key role in the turnaround of an organization that finished their first season in the league last, and then has since then been at the top of the league. And last year finished one game away from raising a championship trophy in the Atlantic League. So, that is basically, starting that turnaround started, sounds like the day that Brady came to Gastonia. So that was a lot of our conversation. So if you would like to scratch the itch for Gastonia ownership drama we have talked about in the past, and we probably will talk about it more as the legal stuff gets settled out. But for now, a lot of baseball talk in this one, which is refreshing when it comes to Gastonia. I think they deserve it.
Yeah, definitely. So without further ado, here's our interview with the general manager of the Gastonia Pro Baseball team, Brady Salisbury.
Now that we're recording the interview, welcoming to the pod, Brady Salisbury, who, among other things, took last place Gastonia Honey Hunters to first after taking over for baseball operations. Now he's baseball operations for what we will call the Gastonia Baseball Club ? With some exciting news there, maybe on the radar. We'll see. I'm looking at his face as I say it to see if he gives anything away. He has not, because he is rock solid, and that's why we are so excited to have him as a guest. Brady Salisbury, welcome to the party.
Thank you guys for having me. No, there's no question marks. Do not get us confused with Frederick. So it is just Gastonia Baseball Club.
That wasn't even where I was going with that. Good memory, though. I guess it's hard to erase the jerseys from your mind, though. The Spire City thing was cool, but boy, those question marks stand out.
It was something. I think they did a really good job rebranding, though. I think the logo and the uniform and everything, I think they did well.
I recently saw the sort of there's one guy, and I always forget which account it is because I follow a few minor league logo accounts, which I think says something about me. But yeah, there was a whole collection of all in the past year brand reveals. I was like, dang, like Spire City might be the best one. They were pretty good. So, yeah. Hey, Gastonia's got to follow in those footsteps now, though. Atlantic League has a bit of a track record of late, so here we go.
Yeah. No, if you checked out the podcast or the presentation, I guess we had the press conference. Kind of the plan is to do 6 what if type weekends. If you're a Marvel fan, the what if is kind of the thing we're going for there. So we're pretty excited about that. And I think, one of the cool things about the new ownership group is they're actually trying to invest and get the community engagement going. So I think by them actually choosing our name, that's a pretty easy way of making that happen.
Yeah, that's a good way to get it right away. I know there was some people, the name was good, but I know some people thought they weren't really involved in the decision making. So getting the community involved right away is probably smart. Now, Nick, I don't know where your head's at here. I figure since there's been so much off the field action related to Gastonia, we might as well start there. And then I will indulge in the on the field side, which I'm eventually going to do because I have no self-control. Does that sound reasonable to you? It is your podcast.
It does sound pretty reasonable to me. And although it is my podcast, I'm sure at some point we're going to get into the heathen math of analytics. And at that point, I will do my absolute best to not check out. But we all know how the last couple analytic episodes went. So we'll see what happens from there.
It just gets real quiet. Start forgetting if he's still on. Do we lose him? Yeah, that's about right.
You'll just see me in the middle. Yeah, you'll just see me in the middle. I'll be making a dentist appointment. Go, yep, they're talking analytics. I imagine getting these teeth pulled will be less painful, yes.
At what point do you tell adapt or die? And when do we get to throw that segment in there from Moneyball?
Right, yeah,
Oh, don't start me with the Moneyball rant, because that movie just completely ignored Miguel Tejada.
I agree.
And an entire starting rotation.
Yeah. No,
Number 5 starter harangue.
No, I agree. Watching that movie now compared to like growing up watching that movie is two totally different things, but still, it's one of my favorites for sure.
Yeah. Well, honestly, you pointing out that you watched it while, quote, growing up kind of ruins what I was about to point out, which was like, guys of our age, I'm just impressed that Nick's out here making his own dentist appointments, honestly. I'm like waiting until there's a damn emergency, dude. But hey, I don't know. Nick is a more impressive adult than I had thought. This is a terrible podcast. Thanks for coming on, Brady. Nick, do you want to start out? Do you have anything you want to get to first before we roll the dice and see where I end up?
You're normally the one that does the intro, does the whole start of it, but
roll the dice. Roll the dice.
That's what we're going to do, because already.
Hell yeah.
I'm curious just to see where this goes.
Well, I'm sure I can focus it. So, Brady, I joked about it at one point in the unrecorded intro I went with. There are obviously some things that you were not going to be, willing or honestly able to say about the last year of drama around Gastonia and the switch from the old ownership to the new ownership. But I know you have a very unique experience of seeing both, an old owner going out in less than spectacular fashion and a new owner coming in and sort of taking on that new role. Usually the handoff involves not a lot of people coming back to a front office. So having seen that, what is something that stands out for you that the people of Gastonia can look forward to, the fans? Because that's someone who I've talked about. I had the privilege of being so many of them while reporting on all of this. And it's a fan group that I hate to admit I really am rooting for, because I don't like to root for people. I'm a Schadenfreude guy. And now there's a whole city of people that I somewhat now know that I really am interested in them having, good years and an enjoyable product. So, first and foremost, I want to hear, what it is that they have to look forward to as you've gotten to know and gotten to work with this new ownership group.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'd like to say I think you guys did a pretty good job of reporting a lot of what was going on. Looking at the last year, but really even the last 2 years, I think there was a lot of warning signs for people. Obviously, I can't, talk too much about it, but as far as the new ownership group, which I'm really excited about, it's already a night and day difference. I mean, in indie ball especially, you really only have your word, and so far a lot of what we've been promised up to this point has already been starting getting fulfilled, and I can't get into a lot of details on that, but no, it's a noticeable difference. In the press conference, I spoke with the city of Gastonia. I told them, I was like, I think this is one of the first times that we've, as a community, had hope in regards to this stadium, the baseball team, the Fuse district as a whole. I think it's an amazing idea that the city's been trying to put together for years, and I think the stadium is kind of the centerpiece of that. So, with us not really doing our part the last couple of years off the field, from a management standpoint, from an ownership standpoint, I think now, if we're able to carry our weight, it's all in all going to help the entire city. So I think it's something everybody should be excited about for sure.
Nice. So, all right, we're not going too far into, now I'm learning. It's fun learning on the fly what the kind of the boundaries are here for what you can go into. So can't get too far into some of that stuff. But when it comes to this ownership group taking over, what are some of the things that you have liked about their past work and some of the things that you feel like they're bringing to the table that can not only be beneficial for any organization, but specifically an organization that has had the struggles that Gastonia has now gone through with both themselves as an organization and the fans?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things to point out immediately is you guys actually had a pretty extensive segment on the other hockey teams that he has. I remember, I think it was around the New Year's, you guys covered a lot of those teams. And honestly, I think it was pretty accurate for me kind of dealing with it firsthand. You see an ownership group that's able to take over. Granted, it's another sport, but it's actually pretty similar when you really dive into, how players are, procured, the payment aspect of it, fans, the stadiums. There's a lot of similarities that the average person may not be aware of. But no, I think they've shown that they can take over stadiums, take over teams, take over brands, whether it's rebranding or just bringing in a new group and making them better. They're having people show up. If you look at, the attendance rates, which I think you guys did, they're all in the top of their leagues, which is something I think we strive for in Gastonia. One thing that it kind of proved, even with our success on the field the last 2 years, it's not like fans were coming in, droves. So I think not just an on-field product, but I think to be able to have promotions, do giveaways, even specialty jersey nights. In the 3 years that the Gastonia Honey Hunters existed, there was not one specialty jersey ever. And now already in this year, granted, it's a little bit of a twist, but we're going to be doing, possibly 6 or 7 or, who knows. So that's already a pretty good sign from that perspective. But yeah, I think being able to meet commitments from local vendors and, businesses, and to be able to actually, put signs up and things like that, it's just already steps that are happening now that I never saw the last 2 years while I was here.
And honestly, you talk about just the jersey portion of it, but 6 teaser weekends is kind of it's a bit of an undertaking in itself. It just 6 large scale promotions like that. So over multiple games actually. So it just is occurring to me as you even say that, I'm thinking of the logistics there, and for an ownership group to roll in and it's part of the branding. It's, beneficial to them to put themselves out there and for the brand, but it's also they could have snuck in and been real quiet about things for a while, assessed, and they're like, no, we're going to jump in this thing early and try to bring something different. So it's encouraging to see that they're not going to shy away. It is impressive to see the response too from the people in the city. Back to the Facebook live video of the press conference. And Facebook, I have worked social media. I live on social media. I am working social media still. And I also live on it for baseball stuff. Boy, it's a cesspool, and there is almost nothing except positive comments I've seen so far. And that's pretty impressive. So you're seeing sort of an immediate response from the city and the fans that seems to be positive in a way that maybe you haven't seen since you got there. Is that kind of what I'm getting here?
Yeah, well, the biggest, kind of concern I had of after this past season, granted, like we joked about, it's been a very long off season in Gastonia. when we were trying to figure out, myself and, of course, Goose, if we were going to stay or if we were going to join another team in this league or other leagues, kind of one of the debates we had was, if we stay in Gastonia, are we going to be able to rebuild? Yes, we've had success on the field, but, it's not going to be something as simple as just, flipping a switch. And now all of a sudden everyone's going to trust us and want to work with us and do all these things from a business standpoint. So for me, it was a very good first sign that, before and after that press conference with the meet and greets and through social media, that so many of the partners we had before have already been reaching out, wanting to work with us, or, city representatives coming and saying how excited they are. Like, that's just something I've not got to see, firsthand for 2 years. So right. Again, it's one of those things that's really been optimistic for me and helped a lot through this process.
Yeah, it's been very interesting to see. It kind of makes sense that the city might rally around this. And I think part of it is too, that stadium was built and now it's been, paid for by taxpayers, and they want to see the stadium come in or filled. And it's good to see ownership come in and make sure that happens. So that already puts them a little bit ahead, but it seems that they're going about things and trying to make things right where they were made wrong previously. Nick, do you want to jump in on some of the off the field stuff or transition anything?
Yeah, I was just going to kind of start to ask a little bit about rebuilding trust in the community, because obviously they've been through a lot, and more than just the community itself, it's also imagine a little bit of rebuilding trust with players and coaches and things like that, because once you've been through the ringer the way they were for the past however many months, it's a lot to ask them to reinvest again, to risk doing that again. So I was just kind of curious what that process is like.
Yeah, well, I mean, looking at it from the baseball ops side, which of course is where I'm at, again, one of the concerns I was going to have is a lot of our players, coaches, all the financial struggles that happened last year, were people going to trust us? Were they going to continue to play here? And luckily, we really haven't dealt with many concerns on that front, because I think a lot of people realize that even with all the BS going on off the field, we still were able to put together an overall pretty season in terms of, win and loss. Obviously, hats off to Lancaster beating us in Game 5 in the championship. But, I mean, 9 out of 10 times, I don't think any team that dealt with what we dealt with this year would have made it as far as we did. So I was more than, proud of what our guys were able to do. They had every excuse, every reason to give up or, just be like, screw it, like, we're not getting this or getting that. Like, why are we, going to do our end of the bargain? But they never did. Guys showed up. And at the same time, these are the exact same guys that are vouching for us too, new free agents or players that want to play in Gastonia. So it's been a pretty awesome experience. And I've been very shocked with how well it's, transitioned this offseason.
Yeah, so there's a real culture of endurance then among the guys that have stuck around, the guys that are going to come back. So I imagine that really helps to continue to build the new culture of the new Gastonia baseball team.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the positives of being able to bring back our coaching staff. The core of where our success was last year is returning. So from that standpoint and like that selling point, that's obviously what we're kind of building off of. Now, for the first time really in my career at the professional level, I'm going to actually see what it's like to have support off the field from the ownership standpoint. So that for me is kind of a selling point, even more so when I'm talking to these guys. I'm like, look what we've done with our hands tied. Now imagine what we're able to do with, no restraints. So that's another reason for excitement and optimism in Gastonia.
Yeah, and I imagine that's a great feeling from a baseball ops perspective when you get to go from the poorhouse to the penthouse, and now you're like, okay, we actually can unleash this thing. I had to fight off like just about everybody else just to be able to put on the product I did, which was phenomenal. As you mentioned, the results are great. And trust me, we got some feedback on when we did our North review about Lancaster. Some people thought we were a little too quick to dismiss them, but second half Stormers, that's going to happen. So the fact you guys were able to push them to the very brink of it was honestly phenomenal, especially when everything was going on. So that speaks a lot there too. So yeah, I imagine that that's helpful.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you saying that. It, like I said, it's going into this year, and obviously all the things that are changing from a baseball perspective, which I'm sure we'll dive into as far as an overall league perspective. But, competing with teams like High Point and Long Island and Lancaster, of course, winning back-to-back years, and everybody else in this league. I mean, it's a very competitive league. I mean, even, you look at the teams that have struggled the last 2 years, like there's nobody at the end of the day that's a walk in the park. And I think that probably is the biggest difference between, for example, us or the American Association or even the Frontier League. And not to talk poorly about them, because I think those are also really great leagues. I know you guys have covered a lot about the American Association and how they've really closed that gap with our league. But, at the end of the day, when you compare top to bottom our leagues, like I still don't think other leagues have met that level yet, but that's not a knock on them. I just think that's just kind of the players that we go after. So of course that's a whole nother discussion, but yeah. I think I think the league's going to be a lot of fun again next year as well.
Definitely. It's going to be even more competitive. You got a new team in Hagerstown coming in too. So that's another element to battle there. And I think at that point, I think we could kind of just make the transition right into baseball talk, unless Ryan, you got something else.
Oh, that works for me, man. Do you have something, or do you want me to pick it back up?
Yeah, just take it and run with it to start with it.
Well, that does work, because actually you mentioned something that I've noticed now. I've put a lot of my offseason into getting a better understanding of where these leagues have been in the past, because it's hard to assess things without sort of that understanding of what was going on in the 90s and like that. But there were so many teams going through media guides where they'd be dominant, and then all of a sudden they're in last, and you're like, what the hell is that about? And the next year there's a note that's like, this team folded, and you're like, oh, understood. And with that, it really dawned as I went through it. I mean, I was impressed to begin with, but really dawned on me how impressive it was putting together that good season last year in particular, with everything going on. Since I did allude to it when you were coming on, man, or when I was introing you, I guess would be a better way to say it. But I mean, since before you arrived to do baseball operations, the team's winning percentage of their first season was .450. Since you've been there, it's .673. I believe that's the best in the league. Last year, incredible run, missed out on the championship by a game. I know it's not all you, so I'm going to get ahead of you because I know you're going to say that. But acknowledging it's not all you, what does it kind of look like? What is the process been like trying to get people in place? I know obviously Goose as well, getting more comfortable and helping get some guys in and get some things in place. But from your perspective, what did the to-do list look like, and how have you sort of navigated that with such success?
Well, yeah, I think it all kind of starts when I first got the job 2 years ago. And, we really can't talk much about our success without mentioning Goose. I mean, he's been the back-to-back manager of the year in this league, which I think may have been the first time ever. Don't quote me on that, but I think there's a good chance of that. When we first met 2 years ago, my first day on the job on the phone, I kind of knew going into it, I was more of a new school analytic type guy. And I knew he was traditionally more of the old school type baseball guy, as he played in the late 80s, early 90s. And so our very first, like one of the first sentences we ever said to each other, I was like, Goose, I think in order for us to be successful, we have to meet somewhere in the middle. I think there has to be a balance from a standpoint of, we got to take numbers and realize why they're valuable. But then we also need to take, what he brings to the table, which is the gut feelings and the decisions that numbers can't quantify. And up to this point, with just about every decision we make from a baseball standpoint, that's how we approach everything. Looking at the rosters we've built the last 2 years, I'm very proud of, especially the opening day rosters with, for example, last year, you look at it 1 through 9, our lineup was pretty insane. And then, our pitching staff, I think we had 3 or 4 big leaguers in the rotation alone. So we've had a lot of success bringing guys in with that in mind, being a well-rounded team. I think, you look at Gastonia, their first year prior to me being here, their offense was, I think, top of the league, probably top 2, if not number 1. However, the pitching was kind of the opposite. So one of our first things we talked about was we need to focus on being more, well-rounded. I think getting offense as a whole is honestly a lot easier than getting pitchers at the indie ball level, just because pitchers typically get more chances, in affiliated ball. But our main focus has been, let's be well-rounded. And you look at our statistics the last 2 years, I think we've been basically top 3 in just about every pitching, offense, and fielding category there is. And I think that has led to a lot of our success. And then at the end of the day, too, that doesn't even include what Goose is able to do from a non-roster building perspective. Like, he gets guys to buy in. I'm sure you've heard stories of guys, especially big leaguers, that come in thinking they're just going to come in, throw 95, get popped in a week, and be back in affiliated ball. And that's not how this league works. Like, it is a very competitive league. You have to play well if you want to earn a second chance. Whatever you're looking for, whether it's international or affiliated. So he does an amazing job of getting guys to realize what we're here to do. And buy into kind of the Gastonia, I wouldn't say the Gastonia effect, but, the last 2 years, I don't think a lot of people realize this, but we've had 28 players picked up just in the last 2 seasons, which is, I would imagine, leads the country. And I think out of those 28, 19 or 20 have actually been in-season purchases, which is even more insane. So we get guys in here, but at the same time we're able to win. So it's a hard combination to do both, but we've done it so far.
It's kind of been interesting to see. I mean, honestly, I think talked in the past, Nick, about concerns about whether or not Goose could sort of modernize, because it didn't look super optimistic in year one. In the reports where it was a pretty old school vibe. And while you're completely right, I mean, there needs to be that. It needs to be a mix of feel and experience with then what we're learning today and, what we might have found out, yesterday, literally at times. But it's been fascinating to watch the two of you sort of have a meeting of the minds and meet in the middle. And I think it says a lot too, because Brady, I feel like, you're a young guy in the game. I'm sure you've seen this where you sort of have a conversation with someone as experienced as Goose and it's talking to a wall or they're writing you off. And I think it's a real credit to him for the fact that he just seemed to be like, yeah, all right, we can work with this. And that's rare anywhere, let alone at a level where, you're working with somebody who's as young. I feel like that's the ongoing theme of the last couple of weeks, Nick, of young guys, they're pretty young in these front offices. And for him, I'm open to it. It's pretty impressive. Looking at just the challenge of surviving Atlantic League season is kind of where my head's at. But because as you went through, the history of last year and the work to be done, I'm also thinking about and then, Long Island comes into town with a bunch of major leaguers and you're like, oh, cool, great. What is it about indie ball that seems to sort of be attractive from your perspective? And the background on this, Nick, you weren't privy to this, but I think maybe the first or second time you and I talked, Brady, I noted that I feel like you're good for indie ball. And you said something along the lines, hopefully this isn't a call out of like, yeah, I mean, it's good for now. It's not really your end game. And it might not be your end game still, but I've noticed talking to you lately, it seems like there's a far more, you seem far more like, yeah, I could hang out here. Like I'm into this. And it's maybe a little bit more attractive than you even necessarily thought it would be when you went into it. So would you mind sharing maybe how your thoughts have evolved and developed as you experience more of the very odd scenario that is indie ball?
Yeah. So honestly, I kind of found out about indie ball shortly before they offered me the job. I didn't realize the dynamics of it. I think 2020 during the COVID year when I was helping do stats up in Lexington for the Battle of the Bourbon Trail was actually my first taste of anything remotely close to indie ball. And at the time, and they weren't even calling it that because the Legends hadn't even officially been cut loose from the Royals affiliation. Right. Shortly after that, actually, when I got this job, I came to a game in Gastonia. I knew one of the players and his father I went to college with him. They invited me to a game in Gastonia. Sure enough, I met, the owner at the time and they ended up offering me a job. And it was kind of crazy how it worked. But at the time, I really didn't know like the type of players that signed here, what all went into the decision-making aspect or any of it. Actually, this podcast and, Ryan, what you were able to do on your channel at the time, like that's kind of gave me a crash course to this. I remember one of the first podcasts I listened to was like the annual Q&A kind of segment you guys do. And for me, like that was kind of like I was absorbing it. Like that was the crash course before I started. So thank you guys for that, by the way. But no, going into it, I really didn't think, this is going to be a long-term situation. Shortly before I was in Gastonia, I worked with the Tigers for a little bit. And so I knew affiliated ball as a kid was always kind of my dream job. But no, like you said, over time, I mean, now doing this for 2 years and you start building a relationship with players and you see how when indie ball is done the right way, I mean, it's beautiful. And that's kind of what for me has kind of changed my thoughts on it. And I could see myself here long term, especially, with this new ownership group and the stability that's finally here. There's a whole nother side of it that I think, whether it's giving guys second chances or giving guys that never even had affiliated, experience a chance to get that call. I mean, Spencer Bivens is a guy that reached out to me immediately. I mean, he was basically a career indie ball guy. Within my first week of the season, my first year, I mean, he got picked up by the Giants, and kudos to him. He earned it. He deserved it. He made so many amazing changes, and it's guys like that really makes what I do special. I mean, as you know, and now anybody in indie ball, whether it's a front office or a coaching staff, you put a lot of time into making a season happen, and even more time to make that season be successful. And so when you have guys get rewarded, such as a Spencer Bivens, it's an awesome feeling. And to compare I think the easiest way to compare indie ball to affiliated is at this level compared to minor league ball, we care about winning. Like we're not investing millions of dollars into a draft pick and be like, oh, we're going to give him chance after chance after chance. I don't care how much, monthly salary we give you, what your highest level is. Whoever is going to help us win at the end of the day, like that's the guy that's going to be getting the opportunities. And to me, that's a huge reason why I like indie ball so much.
Yeah, man. That's one we should talk about at some point, Nick. We should have an episode just talking back through some guys who made affiliate and check in, because every time I look, Bivens was putting up numbers last year. It would be interesting to see if he gets a look at some point. But yeah, it's funny because, again, I feel like everyone. Hey, Nick, is that a thing? You've been doing these interviews longer than me. Is that a thing where people tend to stumble into indie ball? Because I did.
Yeah, nobody really ever sets out to do indie ball. It's always kind of like okay. Even from the player level up, it's just like, yep, this is where I'm at. I want to be in baseball. This is where I'm at. And then more and more you start to come to terms with, you know what, actually. And I can't ever tell if there's an actual draw here or if it's just like Stockholm syndrome. It's one or the other, and I'm still working it out because I'm in the same boat. Yeah,
I'm open to both. That's all right. I mean, hey, you're getting some good people in this end, so I can't complain.
Exactly.
All right. So scanning through my questions here, man. I don't want to get too far ahead of Nick, but I will say, I guess I won't really break into what to look forward to on the field this season yet, unless Nick is ready for me to have that conversation as well. I don't want to burn past something where you're like circling. You got to circle back in 30 minutes after I nerd out. You know what I mean?
I mean, that's just standard on the show. So,
let's go. I am the captain now. So, all right, let's talk about this then. So now you got to build a team where I assume you were privy to more things than I am because you'll work there. But it felt like for a lot of this offseason, there was a lot of talk. Like the league seemed very open about there's going to be baseball in Gastonia. Don't worry about it. But when there's no organization there and there's, bankruptcy hearings, it's hard to stick around as a player. So now you're putting together a roster where, you have a lot of returning faces, thankfully, but you've also had to probably do a little more work than you would have had to otherwise. So how have you gone about putting this team together for, next season? Because I know you don't want to tear everything down. You were one game away. So how have you been able to sort of keep in place what's been good and sort of grab what you're going to need, even if that's more than you would have hoped when the offseason began?
Yeah, well, I think anybody that, follows indie ball year to year, there's a lot of turnover. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why I have a job, I guess. Constructing a roster, it's not easy. I know you guys know that, firsthand. Thankfully we have a lot of guys coming back from last year, so that does make the job a little bit easier. But yeah, getting guys to buy into a team that's kind of up in the air, it was not the easiest, conversations for sure. A lot of it kind of came from a standpoint of myself. Actually, quick little backstory. I worked in sales a little bit back in college and I hated it, couldn't stand it. And when I got here, one of the first things they told me was that, you're still going to kind of be in sales because at the end of the day, you're selling opportunities, you're selling dreams. And for me, I was like, if I'm going to do that, I have to believe in that as well. And, after 2 years of doing this, it's like, okay, I've seen 28, 29 guys come through here, get another chances. So for me, it made that so much easier this offseason of going into these conversations, be like, guys, like here's the facts. Like we've not only won the most games in the country the last 2 years, but we've also had the most guys picked up. So if you're wanting to play indie ball or you're hesitant, like this should be the place you want to be. Not to mention the fact that we're 20, 25 minutes from, Charlotte, which is an amazing city, and having an international airport 15 minutes from our stadium is even better. I mean, it's such a good spot. And then on top of that, we're the southernmost geographical indie ball team on the, this side of the United States. So like, there's so many reasons why Gastonia is a great landing spot. I just had to get guys to kind of like see that, because a lot of people, there is a bad stigma about indie ball. So, it's not like one of those things where like I'm the Yankees calling somebody up and say, hey, I'm going to offer you a job, and they're ecstatic. Like most of the time, like you're having to get people to realize what indie ball is. If you're coming here to get rich and play baseball, it's probably not going to work out for you because nobody's making a ton of money here. But if you're looking at it from an exposure and an opportunity standpoint, that's what we sell, and that's what's worked, and that's what we're going to continue to try to do. So that was basically my number one driving force this offseason when trying to build a new roster.
And talking roster construction, sort of the strategy around it, I got to bring up something which I'm amazed I really didn't talk to you about throughout the last year, because we do talk a good bit. in 2022, for those who don't know, if they went to see your team play a game anywhere throughout the league at any given time on a random night, the odds in that one game said that they would see about 2.5 stolen bases, as you guys went on to shatter the stolen base record. 305 steals. I believe the record was somewhere in the around 250. It was in the 240 range, I think.
Yeah.
This past year, you were 6th in the league in steals for 162. However, you did lead the league in home runs, which is, you basically flipped from the year before where you had 100, you were 5th in the league in home runs. So, I mean, it worked for you. You had a very good team in 2022. And it seemed actually that other teams started kind of went, still stealing bases, getting some speed on the bases is really helping here. What are we looking at? And maybe we should go that way. So it seems that you called a real audible strategically. That's something that you always meant to do. Was that forced by, the players you had on hand, or what was the thought process behind putting together a roster that was going to hit bombs instead of steal bases constantly?
Yeah. So this is actually the favorite part of my job. So this question is like probably one of the favorites I've ever received. So thank you for that.
Let's go.
But actually, no, it was very, very, I guess precise where we were trying to do that. The first year we looked at kind of the rest of the league. And so kind of the thought process was guys that hit for power, A, they're hard to sign anyways because they're going to be more expensive, but B, they're harder to keep because Mexico generally likes guys with power. So one of our thought processes was, obviously we needed to shore up pitching. I mean, that was my number one, no matter what. 2021, and we had one of the worst pitching staffs, I think, statistically of all time. So my goal is we need to be at least league average with pitching, which granted, I think we ended up having like a 3.89 ERA, which was even better than my expectations. But pitching had to be better. Defense had to be better. And then offensively, I was like, as long as we find ways to get on base and run, we're going to manufacture runs. Did I think we were going to steal 305 stolen bases? No, I didn't. But there was definitely an effort to make sure. I mean, we had guys like Jack Reinheimer who had 40, 50 stolen bases. Reese Hampton, I think, had 65 stolen bases. We had a lot of guys with green lights. Jake Skoll. I mean, I think we had 5 guys with 20 plus bags that year. So from that perspective, yeah, like that was definitely what we were shooting for. And then this past year, we noticed a lot of teams in our league going after those type of players. So we realized, well, if we're going to have to be bidding up for speed and defense guys, why would we not transition back to the power guys that are kind of getting left out to dry? So, you look at the lineup we had, it switched over to guys like Carlos Franco, Steven Moya, Curtis Terry, a lot of guys that were more known for their power, not necessarily their ability to run. And at the end of the day, you look at our runs per game over the last 2 years, there was a difference of like 0.1. So even though we did a complete 180, we were still able to create about the same amount of runs. So yeah, it was definitely targeted. I mean, Goose and I actually joke each offseason. We're like, all right, what stat do we want to record break this year? 2 years ago it was stolen bases. This year it was home runs. So now, it's definitely not that easy. I mean, kudos to guys to kind of buying that image, but that's a lot of my offseason interviews this year with potential teams. I told them, I was like, when you're building a team, you have to have an identity. If you're just going out there trying to sign the best guys possible, your team's probably not going to have an identity, especially from an offensive standpoint. And that's been our goal the last 2 years, and that's what we're currently doing right now. And hopefully it pays off again.
That's so bold, man. I just can't get over that. The one, just the wherewithal to be like, hey, it seems like things are getting a little bit tight here on the strategy that we just ran out extremely successfully. So let's just go ahead and change that up, which is wild. So kudos to you on that one. But I'm also
thank you,
low key loving the slight villain energy, which I'm not saying because Gastonia is a good place to play. It's cool. Be cool, Brady. But like part of me is like, hey, I see that we sort of put you in a tight spot here. Trying to get signed for a cool contract because now fast guys are cool. How about you come hit some bombs in Gastonia? That's pretty dark-sided. I kind of like it. That's like macroeconomic manipulation from you on the free agency side. I'll kick it Nick's way because some of the other things, just some finer points that we can get into to sort of wrap things here before I drag it past the point of no return on Nick.
Yeah, I want to circle back to one thing here. Yeah, I know. I don't really know what to do when you're just like, here, take this thing. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Oh, dude, you can always say, no, I'm good. And I'll just take it right on. I just don't want to
No, I have questions. You ran through the stop sign last time.
It's your podcast. There it is.
Yeah, no, you ran through the stop sign last time, so I'm gonna take control of my podcast again. Thank you.
About time.
Yeah. So just circling back to what you said a second ago, you mentioned Mexico likes a lot of guys with power, and obviously this year we have the new rules for Mexico. You're gonna have more import players. So I'm just kind of curious how you're gonna manage to balance that. You mentioned you had, I believe it was 28 guys signed over 2 years. If you can bring more guys into Mexico now, I imagine that number is going to go up a lot. They know your teams. They know the quality of player there, so they're going to look to try and get them from there. So how are you going to try and negate that serious loss to the team?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out currently. I think as far as building the opening day roster, it's still kind of similar to what it was last year, but I think this year is probably going to be the hardest, probably in history for indie ball, especially the Atlantic League, to maintain your roster somewhat regularly. I mean, we at any one point last year, I think at the halfway point of last season, we basically sold one player per every 6 games, which from my perspective of trying to maintain a quality roster, that is very difficult to replace because as you know, you lose a big league starter, there's a very slim chance you're going to find a big league starter on the free agent market to replace him. So it's definitely not going to be easy. I mean, this year we're going to have to database a lot more guys. Ultimately is what it comes down to. I think the league as a whole is going to be a lot younger. So from our perspective, there's a lot of reason. I heard Jack Jennings talking a little bit about it last week, looking at college pitchers or younger pitchers and having guys come in, and he's 100% accurate. I mean, I've talked to multiple managers this offseason. Everyone's like, yeah, like as a whole, specifically on the pitching side, it's probably going to get a little bit younger, especially in the middle of the season. Luckily for us last year, when we started losing some of our big league starters, Marcus Wall and Alex Sanabia, Zach Godley, all 3 of those are big league starters that got purchased from us. And we were able to have guys step up. I mean, Zach Mort, who was co-pitcher of the year in the Atlantic League last year, started off as our 6th starter, a high A guy, and ended up having a career year. Now he got rewarded. He's in Mexico. Gunnar Kynes, another guy who's been in indie ball quite a while, came in out of the bullpen, ended up starting for us, and the 2 of them were very dominant for really the entire season. So Mexico, I think, is definitely going to make that harder, especially from a starting pitcher perspective. But it's one of those things that's hopefully everybody in the league's affected, not just us. And I would imagine, based on the numbers, that's probably what's going to happen.
Yeah, that's the difficulty, but that's also the fun and the challenge of it, though, is finding a way to play the chess game better than everybody else. And I imagine part of what kind of helps negate it is a shortened draft now with MLB. So how do you try to take advantage of guys that would have otherwise been drafted, maybe not signed, but drafted still nonetheless, while also trying to figure out the landscape of these younger guys? Because like you said, pitching's going to get younger, but when it's younger, it's also more unproven. And in a high quality league like the Atlantic League, you start to see fairly early on, okay, who's going to be able to cut it? Who's going to wind up with like a 7 ERA after 2 weeks?
Yeah, no, I don't think there's a simple answer to it. You said with the draft being shortened, kind of my viewpoint as far as looking at the American, the Pioneer, and the Frontier leagues is that in a way, if you're looking at all 4 of the main, major leagues, whatever you want to call them, as kind of like its own minor league system, those college pitchers that are just missing getting drafted, I like watching them go to American and Frontier, Pioneer teams and kind of seeing how they do. To me, like that's kind of like their version of rookie ball. Now I can kind of see like more of an accurate gauge because, as you know, college stats, like although some guys, it can be very valuable, a lot of the times it's a crapshoot. You really don't know how that's going to translate, especially to the Atlantic League, where more often than not, the average age of position players is like 28 and a half. So if I'm taking a college pitcher who's 21, 22 years old and then throwing him against Carlos Franco, there's a good chance that pitcher's probably not going to do very well. So for me, it's kind of that in between balance. In the middle of a season, sometimes your hands force. You have to go after college pitchers. But more often than not, my number one goal is you want to get at least, A ball, double A, triple A type guys because how they're going to translate a majority of the time. So this year, like I said, it's going to be tough, but all we can do is, try to bounce back and get guys to step up. That's why depth in indie ball is so important. You don't get to carry 2 or 3 extra guys. So you kind of do it within. I mean, traditionally our pitching staff each year, we try to have 7 starters at the beginning of the year so that inevitably, when you lose a starter, you've got a guy that can naturally slide in there. in case you're not able to find that, star free agent. So it's just however you're able to manage at the beginning of the year really is what it comes down to.
Yeah. And just out of curiosity, because I've seen this as like a possibility before, but I've never actually seen a team go for it, which would be you look across other leagues and whatnot, and you see teams that are struggling, probably not playoff caliber teams. Is there ever the thought of, let me make a call over there. There's 2 or 3 guys that I really like on that team. See if I can't pull them away for something. Is that now more possible for trying to fill those midseason gaps?
Yeah, I mean, trading in general in any ball is extremely difficult. Yeah, I mean, because nobody at the end of the day, whether they're wanting to give up on their season or just give up a player, like nobody really wants to do it unless a player just flat out says he doesn't want to be there. One thing that I'm not sure if you guys have ever talked about, but an idea I had is kind of like a transfer portal type situation where essentially what I think would be super beneficial, especially for baseball ops guys like myself, is every single league, every single team, you essentially have like your own little page, and whether it's a website publicly or not publicly, I don't care. But as long as I have access to it, I'm going to be fine. You have the roster, you have their age, what they're making, what their housing is, if they have a car, the logistical side of things. But then also, of course, you're going to be able to have stats and all that stuff. To me, not necessarily be, I'm going to put so-and-so on the trading block because that's very video gamey. Yeah. But to be able to like see those guys that, hey, like this guy might be a possible fit rather than me searching through Point Streak or Baseball Reference or whatever. Yeah. Now I can already tell like, hey, so-and-so's actually from our area. He might be wanting to be playing closer to home. Hey, so-and-so actually has a car, so this guy's going to be easier to get into our market anyways. Little things like that I think would be huge, a huge step in the right direction, not just for each team and each league, but actually kind of unifying the leagues, because I get why there's such a big division between all 4 leagues, but at the end of the day, if we're talking about actually helping guys better their careers from a player standpoint, it doesn't make sense why we shouldn't be able to work together a little bit more than what we do up to this point.
Honestly, it's a phenomenal idea. It really is, because it would play on the whole partner league thing, which, again, as we've discussed ad nauseum, nobody really has any idea what it means. And I assume it means nothing now, besides being able to slap an MLB logo on your stadium. But honestly, having the transfer portal page here, almost just like a classified section of, all right, I need this. And then being able to plug all that in to sort the sheet by to find someone that fits it would be a phenomenal idea. It's not something we've talked about before, but something we definitely should.
I don't think it's really that impossible to do. I mean, I know from an affiliated standpoint, they already kind of had that access for all of us. Maybe not as much on the logistical side because they obviously don't care about that, but for us, it should not be difficult at all for every team to be able to submit, an easy roster like with all those things I just talked about. And like you said, being able to filter and all that stuff, I mean, like that would make everybody's life a lot easier.
Yeah, definitely would. I mean, it also would, to a certain level, I could see pushback from some people on wanting to have that, because it does, in a way, devalue the connections you can make. Like, not entirely, because obviously you still have to work to deal with people and you want to have that edge on other people, of course, but at the same point, if you're a newer guy and you have the portal, it makes it a little bit easier than if you're, say, the grizzled manager of 25 years being able to kind of backdoor your way in on a player. So I could see there being push and pull on both sides of it, but honestly, uniforming the system, I think, would be a far more beneficial thing in the long run, especially for players and staff.
Yeah, and again, I don't think it's something where we should promote teams poaching players, especially even season or off season, but I think keeping contact information, all that stuff is very important. But at the end of the day, as long as it's set up correctly, each team, each manager, GM, whatever, like they're still going to have the final say of what happens with their roster. So it's not like, we're going to be able to force people's hands. But I do think it would be nice where rather than me calling up, Lake Country, for example, and be like, hey, do you got anybody, available? I can already come to them with some educated names, and now it's not wasting everybody's time. So it's just something I thought about could probably help overall, and I think it'd make everybody's lives a little bit easier.
Yeah, no, it definitely would. Yeah, Ryan, what's your thoughts on this?
Because you actually steered close to something that I've sort of softballed some people in the past to see what they would say, but I've had the idea of also, up until where trade deadlines would be basically a transfer window like soccer has, because I think it would be a good, there's a lot of times where it's tough, maybe a team's out of it. Maybe a team has more outfielders than they need in the Frontier League, but if you need an outfielder because you just got a guy signed away in the Atlantic, a Frontier League team might be hesitant to give away a guy, even if he's seen as an extra piece right now, because they got people aging out next year, or they might have a good guy just regularly who they don't have a spot for, but they know they'll need him next year and he's developing. But by giving him to, sending him to Gastonia, they might lose out on his future, and young guys are valuable over in that league where you have those roster restrictions. But if there was basically a transfer window where you could loan a guy out, that would allow an Atlantic League team to get him, and he gets to play on a bigger stage for a while. He might even get more playing time, but depending on the situation, probably not as much necessarily, but it is this bigger stage of the Atlantic League and possibly maybe other benefits of it. But the teams, you have a guy who isn't just sitting on your bench if you're in the Frontier League, who you would like to play more and you'd like to see, develop into a future starter for you. And you have one less hole in your roster in the Atlantic League. It could really come to benefit more often than not. So I think that is also an interesting possibility of just trying to get these leagues to work together a little more and, in a way that will be beneficial to everybody rather than just benefiting, one league over another, which is when everybody shuts down and doesn't want to work.
Right. No, definitely. And I think, going even deeper into it, rather than being able to put like guys on a trade block, because I think that's a little aggressive, especially if it gets leaked, but to be able to be like, hey, Gastonia, for example, we're looking for whatever position, you check the box, they prefer, and then you have like your age limits or whatever. Granted, the Atlantic League doesn't have those, but American Association could very easily be like, hey, we're looking for a guy with this much experience. So then, like let's say whether it's the end of our spring training because we start before those leagues, or middle part of the year where we're like, hey, we've got to move somebody and we don't want to just outright release them. We can go check every other team's wants and needs and see, hey, if this guy fits in there, are you interested? Now we're not just releasing guys out to the wind and hoping that, because at the end of the day too, like I don't like releasing guys. I mean, it's a terrible part of the job. So anytime you can find a guy another spot, I think that should be one of the selling points as well. Is like, this is going to allow maybe those 27th man type guys, or maybe it's just somebody that got booted out, is still going to give them another chance to find a spot rather than them going to their couch and now they're trying to call every team up being like, hey, do you need a fourth outfielder? Do you need another infielder? Whatever the situation is. So again, I think if you look at it from that perspective, it's going to be friendly for the players too.
Yeah, I'm on it, man. Anything that can, it's especially every year I feel like I see some guys retire. We're like, damn, really? And you wonder if, maybe there's just a little bit something easier or that helped you out a little bit and let you maximize whether it's your opportunity to make the show or to get into affiliated ball for a little while or just to, play baseball. I'm always in support of it. I sort of interjected there. Nick, did you have anything else you want to roll with here?
No, but I wanted to say one thing. When you mentioned the loan idea, that was the first thing that came to my mind. But what kind of interjected with it was, what happens to the player you loaned out for, say, like a month or two gets hurt? Who's on the hook for that?
Yeah, you can work that out contractually. I mean, carbon copy of whatever it is that the soccer clubs have going on. Honestly, I would take the easy way out there. I think a lot of it would.
In fairness, I think soccer clubs got a bit of a different economic structure and resource base to work off of, though.
There are some clubs who would desperately beg to differ on that one. I've been going down the soccer club rabbit hole recently of how did they mess this up? Basically being the theme. So
basically European at this point, rugby, soccer.
Don't blame me. Sorry, Brady, pretend you're not here. Don't blame me with what we've seen over the past several years, being interested in what could be red flags for a failing organization ownership wise. I'm interested.
Wow. Where were we? Okay. Right in front of the guy. Wow. Okay.
I mean, he wasn't the owner. It's fine. This podcast going well. I think, I mean,
and I was nice to not even ask the question I had about you to think I was being nice. I'll leave it.
No. Run it. Okay. Well, let me bring the actual guest of the show back in so that way we can stop bantering for a second here. I was going to ask Brady if how difficult Ryan made your life last year, because I know he makes my life difficult every goddamn day. So I imagine it was tenfold for you with the way he was going about things.
No, I mean, honestly, again, I can't dive into much of it, but I think there was a lot of red flags that people weren't aware of, and I was glad that there were people shedding light on what was going on. So, not to dive too deep into that, but yeah, it kind of feels like, if you've ever watched, the Marvel Endgame or Infinity War, when the Doctor Strange and he holds up the one finger, only one way where everything worked out. I'm hoping that this is kind of where we're at that point, where it's like, okay, Iron Man just sacrificed himself, and now, here we are. We're on the greener side, and Thanos is dead. So that's what I'm hoping.
I mean, you don't have to be nice to him. I'm never nice to him, so you don't have to be. He's from Pennsylvania. He's hardly a person, even.
That's fair. That tracks. I'm mostly Amish.
That's why you're a Stormers fan, not Barnstormers, just Stormers. Remember that.
Oh God, yeah. Brady and I do have the bond of spending some time in Kentucky and having a soft spot for it. So there is that. So don't overlook it. It did sort of make me think back to, we've had this conversation actually on the pod, Nick, of it did feel like if this organization was going to succeed, and honestly succeed without taking some time off, the path to make that work is very narrow. But it does feel like so far it has kind of followed that path. I mean, has there kind of been an awareness of how difficult, like from inside, this is a weird question to ask, but I'm just curious, like from being in there, like was there awareness of like, there's a very slim chance that this works out properly unless we nail the next move here. And it's seeming like so far so good. I mean, this can't all be happy accident, right? Sorry to circle back from off the field talk, or on the field talk to what we have with the ownership.
No, I think it was all very targeted, very calculated. I think that's the word I was looking for earlier. I think a lot of people had to make things happen in order for us to be where we're at now. It's funny. I can't dive into too much of it, but it's kind of like, it's why this offseason was so difficult. At the end of the day, I really didn't know where I was going to be at next year, whether it was Gastonia with new ownership or, another team in the league or whatever have it. I knew I wasn't going to be back in Gastonia with the same ownership group. I'll tell you that for free, but it was very, very hard. I mean, really up until the last couple months, we still weren't even really sure what was going on. So it's like now I finally feel like I can breathe again and know what's going to happen and be confident in it.
I'll get this back on track again, or something seemingly on track, as long as Nick doesn't have a different idea of where he'd like this to go. I'm going to go into the baseball operations nerdiness, if that's okay, Nick, before we have to let Brady go.
I mean, sure thing. The only thing I want to just point out here is we mentioned the ERA jump a little bit ago, going from the worst to the top. It just reminded me of how much progress got made in the course of just a few months from this show going from the weekly, I think it was Gastonia ERA check or Lancaster ERA check, where it's just like, okay, let's see how bad it was today, to, they're now leading the league in this. Like they're below 4, one of a few teams. So it's just kind of amazing when I think about it.
I forgot you had that going on, man. Yeah.
No, when it was said
a regular
earlier,
portion of the podcast.
Yeah, it was like a weekly thing. We looked forward to it, we were like, let's see how this is. And we forgot one week, and I was like, I can't believe we forgot. People complained that we forgot.
I remember, don't worry, I still have the receipts of 2 years ago when we first started, and there was, the projections for Gastonia, and I think we were like somewhere between like 7th and 9th, and the pitching was like, it's got to be better than last year because it was so bad, but we'll see. So we were happy that it kind of exceeded everybody's expectations.
Yeah,
we really were material for a lot of people. I know Mike Pinto has us up in the office, so that'll be the next one.
I did cheat on that one a little bit because you were the funny year. So I don't think I put out preseason projections that year because I was working with Lexington still. But
that was because you were lazy.
I remember I had them significantly lower. Thanks, Nick. And but we talked just doing baseball operations stuff, like briefly, like 1 or 2 emails. And I remember being like, this is a different energy than what we were previously getting. And being like, and I really looked back at some of the signings to be like reading some tea leaves. I was like, I think this might be a better team than that. So like I was closer than any right to be that year, but I do remember some people like the projections did have the vibe of it's got to get better, but I don't know, man. So that's, I remember that being a topic of conversation with PJ too, of like, what the hell's going on in Gastonia and what's the new guy got going on. Glad, all that to say, glad that panned out and glad games were no longer like 4 hours regularly. You did miss out on that one.
You had, that was the kind of energy that could sell tickets on Facebook.
Listen,
that was one of the reasons why our pitching staff had to be better. People were complaining about the games lasting so long. So they were like, we want your pitching to be better, not just to win, but we want games to be like 3 hours rather than 4 hours. So there was a lot of, push from behind from that perspective. People just wanted the games to go quicker.
Yeah.
I do believe I watched a Blue Rocks team working there that was not good, but they had the decency to be all pitching. So they would lose 3 out of 4 every weekend, but they would do it in under 2 hours and 15 a lot of the time. And I was like, hey, that's not a lot of selling 50-50 tickets. I think I might have been interning that year, so can't complain.
Should have posted 50-50 on Facebook.
Buddy, I don't get me started. Selling 50-50, unfortunately, might have been my life's gift. But that's a different conversation. The conversation I wanted to get to before we let you go was we talked a little bit about it with Jack last year. It came up in the context of Mexico, just for being the next challenge along the way of unexpected challenges to running an indie ball team. But we did ask him kind of what he thinks could be the next challenge that maybe isn't expected right now. Do you have any, when you look forward down the line, do you see, what is the next thing that you might feel you need to start preparing for the potential of, or if you were just to take a guess, what do you think could be like the next challenge to somebody trying to put together an indie ball roster?
Well, and this might be kind of a cop-out answer, but I think inflation. I think inflation's like really been like going up, and there's 2 parts. One, just with normal America, economy, but 2, actually with minor leaguers being paid more, which as they should. That's kind of changed from a perspective of, you look at it before the new unionization, the new CBA agreements. Minor leaguers were paid somewhat pretty closely to what indie ball paid, as far as anywhere from the 1,300 to 3,000 range. Now, I mean, you look at like A-ball, AA guys, like they're making more, if not double than that in some cases. And it's like, okay, now I've got to convince guys not only to come here, but now they're taking a significant pay cut as well. So for us, again, it's one of those conversations. It's another hurdle that we have to kind of overcome. But I think as inflation increases, it, not to, complain to Atlantic or American or anybody like that, but we may end up having to increase, our cap limits, whether it's a per contract or salary cap overall. So who knows what's going to happen there. But I think it's something that I could see happening in the near future for sure.
I'm just trying to think through that. Is there any way around that? Like, I'm trying to be from the problem solving thing. I'm like, that's going to be an interesting one to tackle, because that requires such big picture changes too. It's not one where it's like, we're just going to adjust our angle a little bit more, but that might honestly lean back into the Jack conversation of maybe it's the player amenities that have to be the thing. But guess what? Player amenities will cost more too because of inflation. So
yeah, but it's also a long-term investment.
It
can be.
When you look at it, when you look at it for face value, I mean, it's not something that we can change at my level. Obviously, that's something that's got to be agreed upon way above me. And, who knows? Is that ever going to change? I don't have the answer for that. So honestly, it might be another reason why you're going to see leagues getting younger and younger, not just because guys can automatically go to Mexico. I mean, again, I hate to keep mentioning Carlos Franco, but you look at his track record in the Atlantic League the last few years, traditionally speaking, I think he played at least 2 or 3 years for York and then 1 for Gastonia, and he's been purchased 3 times. A guy like that may not get an opportunity at the beginning of the year with an international or affiliated team, but he's going to get picked up pretty quickly because he puts up the numbers again. Now those guys, they don't have a reason to come, kind of showcase those stats in our league because they're already getting those opportunities at the beginning of the year in Mexico or affiliated or whatever. So it's, again, automatically like those 4A type guys are now, they don't need to start in the Atlantic League like they traditionally needed to before. So I think there's just multiple kind of variables that are pushing towards the league getting younger overall. And I think this year, more than the recent ones, you're going to continue to see that trend.
Never had an OPS that didn't start with a 1 dot in the Atlantic League. Carlos Franco's not actually human. Oh, man. I was just thinking about how fun it was having him up the road in New York for a while there. You've really kind of gone through you did hit my Mexico question. Shout out to Nick for being better at reading my mind, which is probably not a great thing. I really don't have anything else, and I know I hate it. I know that we kind of have to let you go eventually here, but Nick, did you have anything else you want to get to before I have one more question.
I'll let you take the last one. The last one.
All right, Brady, we're both stats people. What is the stat or data point that people are not looking at enough that you maybe value more than others? Nick, shut up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, without giving away too much of my spreadsheets, I think that's very. We're going to keep it simple because everybody has access to it. I think FIP is very underrated. I don't think there's enough, I would think teams in our league or in any ball in general that look at it. I mean, guys, for example, a guy has a 6 ERA in AAA last year as a pitcher. Obviously, that's not great numbers, but you look and he actually has like a 3.5 or a 3.75, whatever it is. You're like, okay, like dude was just unlucky. If a guy like that falls through the cracks and doesn't get an affiliated job, as an indie ball team, that should be your number one target for a pitcher to go after. And that's one of the things we look at. So without going too far into it, that's one of my favorites for sure.
I respect that. I respect the restraint there. Does any of that sort of also play in when it comes to building a pitching staff around you have sort of an unusually shaped ballpark is how I always phrase it, that it can invite some homers, especially out to left field. Is that something that, you do have to navigate and FIP maybe leans more into?
Definitely. I mean, surprisingly enough, if you look at our numbers the last 2 years, we actually haven't been that bad as far as giving up home runs. So big time credit to my pitching staff the last 2 years. What we kind of looked for this past year and really the last 2 years as a whole is strikeouts. Obviously, if you're striking them out, then that's one less play your defense has to make. But also in Gastonia, that's one less chance of the ball getting, wind carried over the fence. So last year, I think we may have actually even broke that record as far as strikeouts per 9 innings as a pitching staff. So that was definitely a concentrated effort we made as well. You look at guys like Zach Moore, a lot of our starters, they are all like 10, 11, 12 strikeouts per 9 innings. I mean, it was awesome to have, and it makes it a little bit easier on our defense. You look at last year, this is something that I don't think a lot of people notice. The first month of our season last year, we had one of the worst defenses of all time. From a fielding percentage standpoint, because we were very offensive heavy. Over the course of the year, we kind of pivoted to a little bit more athleticism, but a lot of that comes with your pitching staff. If you're not going to be able to play good defense, then you better either be getting weak contact that your infield can make plays or striking people out. And thankfully last year, our pitching staff did a good job of both.
Honestly, that one did slip under my radar. So if you're going to have a team that might suck at something for a while, it's always a good idea to just coast that under the radar, maybe hit it with the headline of some power.
Yeah.
But that's what I've got, man. I mean, I know you and I will probably be talking soon enough, whether it's about, baseball or NASCAR, but, if I don't have anything that would be of any interest to probably anyone outside of me and you. So I will give this back to Nick if you want to, close this out and give him the usual opportunities here.
So we appreciate you coming on, Brady. As is tradition around here, we're going to give you 5 minutes at the end to promote anything you want to promote, say anything you want to say, circle back to a conversation we already had, but we didn't totally wrap up, or, talk about something that we didn't get to, because I know this was a little all over the map, but it was very fun and I enjoyed it. And I think it was informative.
Yeah. No, thank you guys for having me on. First of all, I would like to give a few shout outs. Obviously, like we said, my coaching staff, Goose, Chucky Ball Game, and Ian McKinney, they were awesome last year. And I think we're going to be getting the gang back together for this year. So I know a lot of our team is very excited about that. Obviously, our new ownership group, Zoyer Sports, led by Andy Kaufman. I mean, we've talked about the hope and excitement we have now. And I think not just Gastonia, but the whole league's going to get to, experience that firsthand here in a couple months. As far as conversations go, one of the things I did want to circle back to that we didn't touch on a whole lot outside of the whole Moneyball concept. It's funny. I think a lot of people nowadays kind of bring up Moneyball because obviously the movie was, a theatrical, they emphasized some of the wrong points and left out guys like, Tejada and that amazing pitching staff they had. But one of the things I think Moneyball still applies to today, granted, everybody, especially at the affiliated level, they have access to all the same numbers. So it's not like you're going to, be coming up with stats necessarily that somebody else couldn't also do. But I think kind of like what we talked about with our speed and our power we've had in the past is look for loopholes, look for ways to find, advantages in your league. I know I've had a couple guys that are trying to, do baseball ops and things like that at the any ball level. And they're like, what advice would you give? And that would be it. Look to see what the tendencies are of playoff teams in your league. Look to see more often than not what those teams are shooting for, because more often than not, there's some pretty clear patterns. And I think if you're able to find those advantages, it's kind of the new version of Moneyball. It's finding the things that everybody else is looking over. And I think that's what I wake up and enjoy doing, every day. That's what makes me love my job. So shout out to that.
Yeah, finding the needle in the haystack challenge is the excitement.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, man.
Awesome. So,
you got tickets on sale yet, or is that coming up?
Yeah, check our website. I think a lot of that stuff, if it's not already up there, they should be talking about it. So, GastoniaBaseballClub.com basically should have everything you need: schedule, tickets, season tickets, all that type of stuff. So check it out.
Awesome.
And we'll hook them up with once that changes, that web address changes, we'll be sure to hook them up with it. But I do like the black, white, and gray thing. I don't know if that's just temporary or maybe it'll be a longer part of the thing, but kind of a vibe, honestly. So we'll see what's up. I'm not going to push you.
Yeah, no, I think it's clean for sure. We're happy to have those colors this year.
Oh, man, Brady, thank you for coming on, man. I was excited about this. I've been excited about it, honestly, since I started co-hosting on here. I knew I had to get you on, so I'm glad that we were able to finally avoid the legal loopholes we had to wait out and get you on here, because it's always good talking to you, whether it's in like midnight DMs about obscure baseball players or if it's on the podcast.
Yeah, no, like I said, thank y'all for having me. I think it's been a long time coming. It's such a crazy concept to just get to talk to media and promote your team. So who would have thought? But here we are. And no, you guys got my number, so looking forward to hearing from you anytime.
You'll regret that, man.
Yeah, looking forward to having you back on again when we get close to the year. Once again, just want to thank Brady for hopping on the show. We were originally going to do the ALPB South review, but I think that's going to get pushed for next week because we're already at about 2 hours of showtime. So I don't think we need to go any further than that. I'll drop the plugs and we'll get out of here. Ryan stuff at Indie Ball Nation. My stuff at Indie Ball Pod on Twitter. Indie Ball Report everywhere else. Expect some content from me next week. And we're going to try to shoot for another interview next week, but I do have to get that scheduled. So there is that. Likewise, if you want some extra little bit of bonus content, stay tuned until after the music on this episode, because I've included our thoughts on the Josh Altman trade. And by ours, I mean mine, Brady's, and Ryan's thoughts, because we found out about this trade in the middle of an interview, which was fun. So you can go ahead and stay tuned for that. It's about a minute or so long, but it's kind of fun. So yeah, with that said, until next time, don't forget to play ball.
I'm sorry. I'm also distracted by the fact that Josh Altman just got traded, by the way. Josh Altman just got traded, by the way. That's what distracted me, was the DM I just got.
To where? Are you probably
to the Dock Hounds. They already announced it.
Jack, big move, my man.
Big dog. Brady, what are you going to do after this week? What's your move after the pod?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I can match that move, but no, Jack's I enjoyed listening to him talk the other day. This past year we had a couple big trades that we made, and I've got nothing but respect for him. He does a really good job over there, and I think that's another great move for them. I mean, you see Altman, he's an MVP caliber guy. He's been good in Indie Ball. He's been good in affiliated. I think he crushed it this winter in Australia. So that's a huge move. I mean, that's breaking news right there.
Yeah, Altman for Voight.
Wow.
Breaking news on the podcast 24 hours before it goes live. That's cool. I'll be honest. But hey, I'll take it. So sorry for my refocus here.